Guys, this podcast is brought to you by our friends over at Wrestling Collector Shop. The next time you're looking to add the newest wrestling figures to your lineup, you've got to go to WrestlingCollectorShop.com. Started by collectors for collectors around the globe, Wrestling Collector Shop has been serving fans the latest and greatest in wrestling action figures since 2002. Whether you're looking for basics, elites, or ultimates, Wrestling Collector Shop should be your first stop the next time you're looking for wrestling figures. So make sure to go to WrestlingCollectorShop.com and use code SWOGGLE to save yourself 10% on your order. Again, that's 10% off with code SWOGGLE only at WrestlingCollectorShop.com. Hey guys, once again, another episode, Going Postl, another small talk. This week, as you saw in the title, gonna move my mic because I keep looking at it. As you saw in the title, Chris Van Vliet, a guy that is now turned into a friend of the show, a pal, a buddy. I did his show, got a lot of new eyes and ears on this show and on this channel. And I can't thank him enough for that. So he did me a solid, even more, and appeared on our show. And we had a good little sit down. Got to catch up with him and talk the ins and outs of how he got into this crazy, crazy world of wrestling interviews and interviews in general, and all of that. That's George. I didn't do that right, but this is why you guys love this show. It's every episode is never the same as the last one. I do an intro.
Developed a cycle of organized chaos. What you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about.
But yes, it's organized chaos because I used to not do intros at all. I used to just be like, "Hey, this is Going Postl. I'm Dylan. Here you go, George." But like my social media,
how fantastic Chris Van Vliet does when he does his intros for the video content and the podcast content. It's like, guys, today, sitting down, very similar to what you do, but it's
he's got a goddamn nice studio and all that. I have an office with little dolls.
To the point. Like honestly, if this was
no one wants that from this.
If this was Insight, he's already plugged his plugs. He's got his sponsor first ad out of the way, and he's in the interview.
Wants that from us. They want crazy. They want. You know what he is?
Organized. A professional.
Very organized.
Let's
very
go. Let's find the word.
Very. He is the Pizza Hut buffet. Organized. Nice setup. We are Pizza Ranch. Shit is all over. You don't know what you're going to get on the pizzas. There's no signage on the correct pizzas. You don't know if it's fresh. You don't know what Pizza Ranch is. Sorry, CC's. Do you have a CC's?
I know what CC's is. That's fine.
Yes, that's what we are. Just chaos. You're still going to get what you want. You're still going to get the pizza buffet. You don't know what kind of pizza it's going to be. You don't know. I was
going to say he's probably more of like the fine dining Michelin star, and we're like Pizza Hut.
Well, fucking Pizza Hut buffet. Nothing beat that. You did this. You said it was going to be short and sweet, and now you took us down a lane that we weren't going to go down. You did this.
I didn't do anything.
That's George. I'm Dylan. He's my ride-along partner for now 2 years and counting. And we are 50 episodes in, and we're doing good. Guys, this is Going Postl. George, talk to the people.
Technically, it's episode 39, technically. But,
I thought we were more than that, actually.
Well, so it's weird because there's like the Patreon episodes from Major Pod, then there's our episodes, and then there's no reruns, but then there's also the small talks, which like I didn't always count as full episodes because they weren't about you. It was you. It was this whole big thing, and they weren't always a part of the podcast. It's complicated. This podcast is a complicated history, but like Dylan said, sitting down with CVV for what I honestly think may be the most flipping the tables interview that you've ever done. And you start right away with that. He is the interviewer. And now you have made him the interviewee, and he has to sit in the hot seat and answer all the questions.
I could tell he was very uncomfortable when he first sat down and was like, "Oh, I don't know, man." And then I don't know if you kept it in. Or
I did not keep in the battery.
Guys, peek behind the curtain. CVV had a huge issue where his battery on his laptop just was about to go. And then nothing he could do fixed it. He felt like such an asshole. And it ended up being
a faulty cable. I think he had a faulty cable, and then he ended up going and changing it. And that was the end solution. But yeah, there was a little bit where he was a little chaotic in the sense of he didn't want the interview to drop. He felt bad being a speed bump in an otherwise very, very nice interview. But let's get this out of the way so that we can go right into that interview at Going Postl Pod on all forms of social media, at Dylan Postl on all forms of social media, at PodXchange on Twitter, X, whatever you're calling it. Make sure to also follow Affairs Pod and Game Marks Pod on all forms of social media. YouTube.com/Dylan Postl. If you're listening to this episode on your podcast feed and you want to see the video version, that is where you're going to go. YouTube.com/Dylan Postl. DylanPostl.com for all things Swoggle. ProWrestlingTees.com/Swoggle for his shirts. What else? SwoggleAuction.com for a free $10 credit over at Whatnot. Dylan, when is the next Whatnot stream?
The next Whatnot? Well, if you're listening to this live, we're going to do a big WWE Immaculate Card break tonight, Wednesday. It is Wednesday the 26th if you're listening to this live. Otherwise, the next Whatnot is going to be July the 10th. July 10th, we're going to have a signed Shockmaster figure. We're going to have a signed Tony Schiavone figure. We are going to have a PSA 10 me card. It's going to be wild. It's going to be crazy. These Whatnots, the last couple Whatnots have been insane with not only like the bidding wars, but also just the fun we have and how much interactivity has been going on back and forth. Again, it's literally a live meet and greet every time on Whatnot. Whatnot.com.
I don't know, man. Is that it? Is that all the plugs? Are we good to go?
I think that's it.
Hell yes. Well, we're going to take a quick ad break, and when we come back, it is Dylan's sit-down interview with Chris Van Vliet. Do that thing that you do when you throw to the ad, because now I like it.
Ad break. Hey, guys. Another small talk. And this episode, not this week. See, this is why I don't do these interviews, and the man that is with me does. He is got me already.
This is going to be ridiculous.
He's a TV personality, a radio personality, an all-around good guy. Cosmopolitan's Bachelor of the Year. This is a good friend of mine. Just a all-around great human being. CVV, as I call him, Chris Van Vliet. Hi, pal.
Dylan, it is so good to see you. I had such a fun time when you came back on my show, that one that came out a few weeks ago. You're the best. You're the best.
I also forgot a GD Emmy Award winner.
Oh, yeah. Oh, those things.
No. He's got his YouTube plaques behind him.
There's only
no Emmys.
Should I grab them? They're right over here.
they're holding down this set of mail and this bill over here. That's all they're doing. Oh, the reminders for next week? Oh, that's just under that Emmy. That's the number 3.
Instead, no, he won the Cosmopolitan's Bachelor of the Year 13 years ago. Yeah.
Oh, if you think we're not getting into that, it's on the list, pal.
Oh, boy. This is going to be silly.
How odd is this for you being on the other side?
Yeah, this doesn't happen so often. I'm usually the one guiding the conversation and like just sitting back and letting the entertainment happen. So does this mean I have to provide the entertainment?
You gotta be the one with the stories and
all downhill from here, my friend.
Newfound Glory reference. There it is.
Oh, and it's
Hey!
all down here from here.
20th anniversary of Catalyst this year. It's going on tour.
I love Newfound Glory. Is that your favorite album? Is Catalyst your favorite
No.
album?
Probably Sticks and Stones.
Yeah,
No, you know what? Their latest one with the acoustic version of their latest.
Wow.
I really like. Dylan Postl loves acoustic. Dylan Postl, big Nelly guy. I told Doc about this. Limp Bizkit, Nelly, and Newfound. Also a huge Ryan Cabrera guy and Dashboard. Love Ryan Cabrera.
Ryan Cabrera is pretty great.
And
I think my favorite I think my favorite Newfound Glory album is the I guess the self-titled one.
Yeah,
with Hit or Miss and Dress to Kill and Sucker. Like that album for me was like my real introduction to like the poppiest of pop punk music in the year 2000.
I just got into State Champs a lot.
Oh, I love State Champs.
I loved them like a few years ago, and they fell off for me, and I fully back in the State Champs realm.
I appreciate bands like that where like you listen to their new album and it just feels like it's an album that you didn't discover from 15 years ago.
Yeah, so I'm taking Landon to see Blink 182 with a bunch of buddies of mine.
Yeah.
And like it was supposed to be just a buddies trip, and I was like, I always get an extra ticket because you never know where life is gonna be. So I always gotta get an extra ticket. And Landon goes, "Hey, can I go to that concert?" I said, "To Blink?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "Okay, sure." And then I was like listening to their new album, and it just didn't click for me, and I don't know why, and I can't put my finger on why, but man, that live album, the concert album hits so hard for me. That era, it's like we talk about nostalgia. I talk about nostalgia a lot on here. Nostalgia makes things so much better, and I think that was my nostalgia of music listening. Yeah, so that's why everything is good in that era.
Nostalgia is a hell of a drug, and I think that people every generation says they don't make music like they used to.
The Beatles,
every generation,
yeah,
every generation does that, and it's because music takes us back to a time and a place, in the same way that pro wrestling takes us back to a time and a place in our lives. But when I think about like listening to Take Off Your Pants and Jacket, or I think about listening to Newfound Glory, I'm immediately transported to that time of my life, and I go, "Oh yeah." That made me feel this way when I first heard that.
Do you think I think we talked about it. I know we did. Like wrestling. We're going to bring everything back to wrestling because wrestling, the world revolves around wrestling.
It's true.
Is that why fans of the 80s or fans of the early 90s and that attitude era or current, like, do you feel that that's why people have such a heartfelt feeling for those eras, is because that's when they fell in love with it, same as music?
I think so. You've got two very powerful forces that work up against each other in wrestling. Nostalgia, of course, and then you've got recency bias. So you might see a PLE and go, "Oh man, that was a great crowd or a great match or a great finish. It's the best of all time." It's like, well, will it stand the test of time? If we look back on this in 10 or 20 or 30 years, will we still think about the crowd at Backlash being the best of all time? Probably, because that crowd was insane. But I feel like those two very powerful forces work up against each other. So I think that there's people of a certain age that go, "Man, it's Hogan in the 80s. Like that era is so good for me." Then you get a lot of people that go, "Oh no, man, it's the 90s, right before the Attitude Era." And I go, "I'm not so sure about that."
Man, that was my era. That was my era. It was the new generation.
That's your era? Wow. Okay.
That was like when I got into it for Warrior, but like I remember more from 91 to New Generation is when I remember like loving wrestling. And it's such a shitty time. Like the new generation era. It's so, looking back, I
love
great.
The Attitude Era so much. And I think that people often look back at the Attitude Era with rose-colored glasses because, yeah, there was amazing stuff that was going on with The Rock and Austin and Mankind and Triple H and Undertaker. There was also beaver cleavage and naked Midian and, the way that women were being treated like, it's not great.
Yeah, every match was punch, kick, finish, chair shot. Every match. There was nothing else. There was no heat. There was no comeback. There was just punch, kick, finish. That's all it was. Oh, we're going to break the table 6 times in this episode of Raw. We're going to have,
and I think it's difficult.
Crash.
I think when people hear now, like, oh, this is the best era. Wrestling's never been hotter than it is right now. There may be some truth to that. But I think because we're in it right now, it's difficult to be able to see the full scope and the full picture of it.
I got so much backlash, no pun, for calling WrestleMania 20 the best WrestleMania on your show. And I was like,
it's not a great choice.
You're out of your mind. I will take that one to the grave.
That's the hill you're going to die on?
I'm 100% going to die on WrestleMania 20 is better than 17. I 100% will die on that one. But
I think a really strong case is currently being made for WrestleMania 40 and will continue to be made over the next many years for 40.
It might be the number 1 of all time. I told Landon the other day, I said this might be viewed as the number 1 of all time, especially with it being 2 nights now. I mean, that's the sad thing. You can't call now like the last however many WrestleManias. You can't say like, oh, WrestleMania night 1 of 32 or 36. You don't do that. It's just 2 huge nights of one Mania, which almost like there should be an asterisk at times because it should be one of the 2 nights, but it's never going to be viewed that way.
Do you think we get to a point, because they just announced that SummerSlam in 2 years will be 2 nights? Yeah. Do you think the big 4 all end up becoming 2 nights?
So I was, again, Landon asked me that same thing.
That guy's so smart.
No, he's not.
How did he come from you?
Exactly. That's what everyone said. All my buddies say, God, he's just a good dude. How did you make that? I said, I don't know. Between his height and his character, I don't know how that did. But he goes, hey, they could do like the Rumble 2 nights.
Absolutely.
And have the women's
that one's a
one,
no-brainer.
Have the women's on one and have the men's on the other. Mm-hmm. Or I think I don't see Survivor Series going. I don't know.
Especially if they keep putting Survivor Series on or really close to Thanksgiving. Like that was weird last year. Thanksgiving weekend.
It was very, very. But that's how it originally was. It was originally on Thanksgiving night, so that's I get it. But it's weird to think back to now. We already got into wrestling immediately. I didn't even want to get into it until later.
We can continue to talk about pop punk music.
CVV, how did you started on TV in your home country of Canada? Was that the field of choice, like growing up? Was that the field you immediately saw yourself in as a kid? You wanted to be a broadcaster or an interviewer?
Yes, but it felt like the longest of long shots for me. So I grew up just fascinated by broadcasting. I remember having a Fisher-Price tape recorder when I was 4 years old that had a little mic attached to it with like cassette tapes.
Yeah.
And I would pretend to be the radio DJs that I would hear on the radio and pretend to be the Blue Jays broadcasters. That was kind of like my first introduction to it. And I always loved growing up watching TV hosts, whether they were on game shows or whether they were hosting dating shows. I was obsessed with Roger Lodge, who hosted Blind Date.
Blind Date.
Yes, Blind Date.
Blind Date the other day. It was so good. It was so good.
So good.
I loved Blind Date. Oh,
Me too. So I wanted to host a show like that. And in Canada, I didn't really see a path for that because all the shows that we watched were these American shows. For me, I was like, well, what if I could, I don't know, somehow find a way to get on TV through the local news and then that could figure its way out. But I didn't think this was possible. But I was like, I'm going to throw the Hail Mary of all Hail Marys and see what's possible here and see what we can do. My high school had a communication studies class where we actually had like a TV studio in this classroom, and you rotated around. One day you were a camera operator, then VTR, then audio operator, then you were master control, and you went all the way around. And then eventually you were the person on set. You were the talent. And I just loved it. I love that. I ran for vice president of my student council because that was the person who did the morning announcements. And I'm like, here's a chance to have my own little radio show in front of
that's great.
A captive audience. Yes.
So learning all of those things, but you always wanted to be the interviewer. You always wanted to be the broadcaster. Was it radio or TV mainly? Anything?
I saw them as the same thing.
Okay.
And so I went to college for communication studies, and I had the best time there. I lived with 4 of my best friends, pretty much majored in drinking, and went to class on occasion.
Yeah.
And I remember waking up in my senior year, Dylan, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, oh my gosh, we're going to graduate at the end of this year, and we got to go work for, the rest of our lives. And that hit me so hard because I was just enjoying life as a student. And all of a sudden, one day we're going to wake up, boom, it's Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. And I decided in that exact moment, I didn't want to be one of those people who hated their job. I didn't want to be one of those people who hated going to work on Sunday, or they hated Sunday because they knew Monday was the next day and they had to go to work. And I just didn't want to be that person. And I decided in that exact moment that I was going to do whatever I could to try to find a job that I just, at the very least, didn't hate. And I just reached out to every radio station and every college station in my hometown and my college town and said, hey, can I volunteer and see how it's done in the real world? And that's where it really started here.
So you're doing your thing in Canada, and then you're working on the news stations and the radio there. What brings you to the U.S. and, of all places, my second home of Cleveland?
Oh man, I love Cleveland so much. Oh, love it. So my very first job was in Peterborough, Ontario, Canada, for our wrestling fans out there. Yes, that is the hometown of one Robert Roode. So I was working for a TV station there, Chex TV, and I was reporting on the silliest news stories that, like small town news, right? Like a new stop sign in town and things like that. Then I got the incredible opportunity to work for MTV2 Canada in Vancouver. So picked up my life, packed it into my 1995 Toyota Corolla, drove 47 hours across the country and started my new life in Vancouver. And while I was in Vancouver, it was amazing. I was interviewing celebrities and musicians. That's where I did my very first wrestling interview with Bobby Lashley. That show got canceled after a year. One big media company bought another big media company, came together, and they were looking for ways to cut their budget. And our show just happened to be one of the things on the chopping block.
Did you have
during
other
that
work?
time? I was unemployed for 7 months, and it was a really difficult time because I had just picked up my entire life, moved it across the country for this dream job, and after a year, it just disappears. And I had to decide. My lease was almost up on my apartment, and I had to decide: do I continue to stay here in Vancouver where I really don't know a lot of people, or do I pack up the car again, drive back home and move back in with my parents and try to figure it out? And that's what I ended up doing. I moved back in with my parents and I was unemployed for 7 months, and I just was looking for work and trying to find something. And it would be between me and one other person or me and 2 other people for a job, and I just wouldn't get it. And I had a moment where I was like, if I can't find a job in the country that I live in, the country I'm from, could I look elsewhere? Could I look in the US? There's got to be way more opportunities there. I got an amazing agent based in LA. She started sending me out for a lot of different auditions and a lot of different castings. And long story short, that's how I ended up getting an audition to be the entertainment reporter for the CBS station in Cleveland. And I was in Cleveland for 5 years, and that is still very much my American hometown. I love it there.
So you were working for the entertainment channel in Cleveland then, and then what is it from there that you dive in to the depth of pro wrestling?
I'd always been a pro wrestling fan, and I wanted to be a wrestler. I trained when I was in college, actually. So I trained at wrestlers. Canada,
obviously.
Yeah, I trained in Toronto at the Squared Circle. I went for a little while, but it was in the summer between, like, we were ready to go back to school in that September.
Yeah.
And when school came around that September, I was like, all right, well, what am I going to do here? Do I focus on wrestling school or do I focus on school? Because I'm a big believer in the phrase, the man who chases 2 rabbits catches none. So I want to be able to put all of myself into one or the other. So I was like, I'm going to get my communication studies degree and figure that out. So always passionate about wrestling. I was a backyard wrestler in high school. Got some pretty decent moves, I think, too. So it It's pretty good. Not bad.
I love that. Has footage of this ever gotten out?
Oh, yeah. I showed Matt Hardy some of my stuff because I did a twist of fate. I did a swanton bomb. And he's like, oh, that's actually pretty good. So
did you have, was it on trampoline? Was it on mattresses? Was it a makeshift backyard ring? What was the backyard ring situation?
It was those really thin blue gym mats. You know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
And those on top of grass don't feel so good.
No. Okay. All right. I like whenever I hear backyard wrestling stories, I like to hear what the ring was, because I did bed sheets and sleeping bags, and then we found a makeshift wooden ring about 30 minutes north, and then we also used mattresses that we would just find, and we would cover those with sheets. Sometimes there's trampolines. It's always a good mix of what was the backyard wrestling ring.
We were crazy too. Like, I remember we were 16, 17 at the time.
Yeah.
We did this like it was a sideshow sometimes. Like, I remember going to like the local park where we were all watching fireworks for Canada Day, which is July 1st.
Yep.
And I remember just like out of nowhere, someone was like, hey, I hear you do some backyard wrestling. And my friend's like, hey, should I give you a suplex right now? I'm like, of course you should. And snap suplex onto the grass. And we're like, hey, look how cool that is.
That's great. Yeah. And
it was stupid.
And now it's happening on subways and in Central Park and just all over. Like, that was just, it's a real thing now.
It was so silly. So with my love of wrestling, my job in broadcasting, I was able to merge these two together. So yeah, you're interviewing actors and directors and comedians. And then every once in a while, WWE or TNA would come to town, and I would say to my boss, hey, could I reach out to WWE and interview somebody? Yeah, sure. Of course we can do that. And that's how, it was 1 or 2 interviews a year. And then it turned into 3 or 4 a year. Then it turned into me going, wow, that independent wrestling company is bringing in a pretty big legend. Maybe I could reach out to them and see if they would let me do an interview, put a little bit of it on the news, and then I put the rest of it on YouTube. And the idea here I wasn't trying to grow a YouTube channel. I started my YouTube channel in 2011. All I was trying to do was have like a digital library of these interviews, because with the way that traditional broadcasting works, if I do an interview with someone like Mick Foley or Jeff Hardy, or some of the interviews I did, very, very early in my career, unless you're watching Channel 19 on that exact Thursday at 4:16 p.m., you're never going to see this. So I thought, man, there's got to be other wrestling fans around the world that would appreciate this. I'll just take this raw interview, put it on my YouTube channel, and it can just live there forever. That's really all this was. That's how this whole thing began.
So how did it go from, hey, you get 1 or 2 or 3 a year, to that's what your focus is?
It's like when you go back to the early, like my early YouTube videos, it's like Brad Pitt and then Jeff Hardy. Like Oprah and then like Jack Swagger. Like it's just this weird mix. And it was like around 2017 where I was like, well, if I could get media access to WrestleMania Access and like just bring a camera, well, maybe we could do some interviews there. All right, we'll throw those up on the YouTube channel. What if I could go to one of the local wrestling shows in Cleveland or in Miami where I lived? What if we could get some interviews there and put them up? And it turned into, instead of just doing them for the TV station, selfishly doing them for myself as a wrestling fan and put them on the YouTube channel. It was like 15 or 20 a year in like 2017. And then in 2018, I was like, well, maybe I could do more of these. And I did more of them. And I think it was 2019. I was like, what if I could do 50? So that'd be 1 a week. What if I could do 50 wrestling interviews between everything that's going on? And I could jump in the car and drive around and find these interviews wherever they are. I think I ended up doing 100 that year. And I was like, Jesus, I'm definitely onto something. And this is growing at a rate that, like, I'm doing this in my spare time. I'm still working as a television host in Miami. What would happen if I were to flip this? What would happen if I were to just put all of my time into this? And that's what I did in 2019. I ended up just going all in on it, betting on myself. And that's where we are now.
Was there a moment in that where Was it a single interview? Was it a moment during a sit down where it was like, okay, we're on to something, or this is the okay, exactly what you said. Exactly what you said of the I'm ready to put my eggs all in that basket.
Yeah.
And not focus on the broadcasting. Was there a moment where it clicked of like, this is what I want to do?
I think I feel like anyone's career is kind of like a series of like, it's just like a staircase. Like this leads to this, that leads to this. Yep. And that's, very evident in what you've done in your career. I feel like the 2019 was really kind to me, and I had a lot of opportunities. And if you recall, before the world that we're living in now, where we're so used to having two, big brands, WWE and AEW, when AEW was announced in 2019, that was massive news that there was going to be another brand on TNT for the first time in 18 years. And Chris Jericho gave me an interview like early on, like right after he announced that he was signing with AEW. And I'd done interviews with him before, and we had a bit of a relationship. So he was like, yeah, sure. He's like, I'm doing a podcast. It was like 5 hours from where I lived. Like, yeah, if you could come up here a little bit early, we could do the interview before I do the live podcast. So I drove 5 hours up there, did the interview, and then drove 5 hours back. And I was like editing and like while my friend was driving my car, and we stopped at a rest station because ironically the laptop was starting to die. So like it was all this effort, right, to like get this video up as quick as possible. Chris Jericho hadn't even talked about leaving WWE and signing with AEW like in a public forum. So it was the Jericho interview, followed by an interview with Tony Khan, followed by the Young Bucks, followed by Luchasaurus. It was all these big interviews that were happening at a time when like we knew the names of these performers, but we didn't really know a lot about them. So there were a lot of people going to my channel to go, man, I've heard about Luchasaurus. Let me learn a little bit more about him. I've heard about Tony Khan, who started AEW. Let me learn a little bit more about him. It was all of that stuff starting to just kind of build on itself. And then I got asked to be part of the very first episode of Dynamite. Very tiny little small role. And I knew that I wasn't going to be able to...
It's television. It's television. It's a role. That's what matters.
Most people don't remember that it happened, and I'm quite all right with that. But that was, I think, the pivotal moment where it was like, all right, I can't do both. Like contractually, I can't do both. What would happen if I just start to go down the wrestling path here? And that was kind of the moment where I was like, all right, well, I'll just figure it out. And that's kind of, how life is. Yeah. Just take one step and just hope I can take the next one after that and after that.
The difference with your interviews that I love and that I think a lot of people love is they aren't the typical, what I call, how'd you get into wrestling, pal? Whoa, who trained you? Oh, what was your first match you remember? Who is your favorite? It's the same song and dance a lot of the time.
Sure.
Yours are different. Yours, and also we talked earlier, they aren't ever like clickbaity. They aren't ever about that. Yours bring out like real emotion and just heartfelt things and fun stories that you can then clip and get different reactions to. Was that always kind of your mindset of making yours different, or is that just how you are?
Man, thank you for the very kind words. I've just always been fascinated by people's stories. Like I remember being in college and reading a lot of just the paragraph biographies about people, or, 1 or 2 or 3 paragraphs about people, because I love learning where someone came from. And then you look at where they are now, because unfortunately with social media, we just see the finished product so often, right? We just see Tom Brady with the 7 Super Bowl rings, or we just see the actor standing up there holding the Oscar. And we don't see the path that got them there. We don't see the stumbles along the way. So I've always just genuinely been really interested in that. Like, because I think that those are the things that are the most important. That's what makes you who you are. That's such a big part of your story. So I've always just selfishly asked questions. Like I ask most of the questions in the interview or guide the conversation truly because I want to know, like, how did you get here? And what's the answer to this question? I've always wanted to know. I also watched this guy in my home country of Canada. He's a great host named George Strombolopoulos. He hosted a talk show and was just the most conversational interviewer. And you would watch an interview with someone you weren't even interested in or didn't even know something about them. And it would just fly by. 15 minutes would fly by because I just felt like I was eavesdropping in on like two friends just catching up. And I always really appreciated his style of interviewing because there's nothing worse. And you know this as the person who's on, you're being interviewed a lot, Dylan. So there's a lot of people that are like, okay, so we talked about that. Now, the next thing I'd like to ask you is in 2007, and they're just like, it's question.
Yep.
And that's not how a conversation works.
Correct.
Like if you and I were to go out for a beer, I wouldn't be like, okay, now Dylan said this. And when he's done answering that question, I am then going to ask him this. It doesn't work like that. Like that's not how the real world functions.
Yeah. I have such a hard time and I have such a hard time with these interviews. I love doing them, but I have such a hard time with them, especially when when they're with friends of mine, because I don't want it to be I want it to be just a conversation. And yours just flow. All of your interviews, they just flow like a conversation, and they just like there's never like a want for that gotcha moment, if that makes sense. There's never that. It's just like and I think that's why you've always been like accepted. You've always been accepted in the world of wrestling and entertainment and all that. It's never just out for the buzz topic.
And I don't really ever want to be that. And
yeah.
I think that I have a very slight advantage with the fact that I did train, the fact that I do know what it feels like to take a bump. I do know what it feels like to run the ropes. And again, I've never had a match before, but I did train. What I find interesting in that is if you and I are watching a baseball game, maybe we've never played baseball professionally, but chances are we've thrown a baseball. And if we're watching basketball, chances are we've dribbled a basketball and we've shot at a hoop. If we're watching football, yeah, we've definitely thrown a football at each other. So many people watching wrestling have never even like touched a canvas, like haven't even stepped into the ring to see what it feels like. So I feel like there's a real, like a very slight advantage that I have there going, yeah, I get it. I haven't had a match bell to bell, but I understand, what it takes to do this.
It's funny that you say that because whenever, the independent shows and they do like, oh, pictures in the ring, a fan, you get a picture in the ring with the guy. Seeing the fan get up the stairs onto the apron and just look at the ropes like, how do I get in it? And then it's the funniest feeling to me because it's like, this is either going to go perfect or it's going to go opposite. And there's no middle ground with it. And it's just, they finally, and then of course they have to like lean on the ropes and do the typical, oh, how do these feel kind of thing. And it's like it all clicks to them like, oh, this is different than I would have ever expected.
Yeah. And I just find that part fascinating. So I don't know. I've always wanted the conversations to just flow too. Like I think some of the best interviewers like a Howard Stern or like an Oprah or Joe Rogan, it's effortless. It's seamless. You don't even realize they've gone on to another topic because the conversation just naturally flowed there. And that's always been the goal for me.
With that, you talked about the interview with Jericho, that you really felt that was the one that kicked everything off. And then the Tony Khan and the Luchasaurus for the AEW, the beginning of AEW stuff. You've had some quite big moments in your interviews. Is there one that stands out the most? And is it getting parenting advice from The Rock? When I saw that a while back, I was like, I don't know. Being a dad myself, obviously I talk about every episode and to nauseum, I'm sure, but we've connected a lot on being parents.
Yeah.
And so knowing how much that means to you, that's a pretty big deal. Like
that moment was so wild because my wife Rachel was like, I think 9 or 10 weeks pregnant. So it was early on and we hadn't told our parents yet.
Okay. Oh.
Okay. So and I had this interview for the Black Adam junket coming up soon. And I said to my wife, I said, I've got this idea. Like The Rock obviously loves his daughters so much. He seems like a great dad. I feel like there's a moment there to ask him about some advice about being a dad. Is that okay with you? Like I asked my wife first. She goes, of course. Well, you're never going to get this moment ever again. Plus, we want to wait to tell our parents in person. So if this moment with The Rock goes well, we'll just save this moment and we won't publish it. We won't post it for months. Like, oh, okay, cool. Well, my wife's honestly the coolest ever. It's great. So the moment happens. And again, really early on, I hadn't really told that many people. I told some like close friends around here, but me saying those words to The Rock out loud were the first times, like one of the first times I'd ever heard myself say that. So I'm saying I'm going to be a father for the first time. And like the feels, like I'm getting goosebumps as I'm saying this. Like it hit me like the gravity of that statement. And The Rock gets up, gives me a big hug. And his answer could have been like, get your sleep now, or like
the typical thing that the guy at Target will tell you. Yeah,
right. It could have been so cliche and such a throwaway moment. It could. Oh yeah, well try to change as many diapers as you can. Instead, he turned into this incredibly insightful and thoughtful answer that I'll never forget. So it wasn't just that I was telling him I was going to be a dad, but it was the response that he gave me. And I think it showed the true humanity of who he is. And also, this being a dad, when someone else comes into the club, when someone else joins the new dad club, there's something that's like, oh, you put yourself in their shoes. You're like, I remember feeling the way you feel. And buddy, it's the best.
I talk about it literally all the time. I talk about it constantly, how I had Landon, and then Kofi had his son. And so him and Hawkins, pardon me, him and Hawkins were we were the car for so long. That was our car, me, Hawkins, and Kofi. But then we'd like stop for lunch, or we'd stop for dinner before the show. And Kofi and I would go out and call our kids back home, and we'd literally just leave Hawkins at the table alone. And he would just get so, guys, you're making me like talk to the waitress or like just to sit by myself. This isn't cool. Like that's not good. But then, so Kofi and I called ourselves Team Dad. Oh, that's just what Team Dad does. When we got the text of, hey, can I finally be a part of Team Dad now? It was like exactly what you said. Oh, this is the best day ever. Like it's the coolest moment. It's almost seeing it through other people. Like their happiness from it happening is almost as cool as it happening when you find out yourself, because you realize like what they're about to experience, what they're about to go through. The amount of
times, our daughter just turned 1, Logan. The amount of times we're walking around the grocery store or Target or wherever, and we're holding her, and a grandparent will look and smile, and their eyes basically say like, it goes so fast. Like they're remembering themselves in that moment, however, 30, 40, 50 years ago, whenever it was. And it hits me so hard when I see that reaction. They just look at like a cute little smile or a little acknowledgement. I'm like, oh, damn. Wow.
And then it turns into everything else later in the child's life that you have to deal with. That they're also nodding and going, oh, yeah. Just wait for what's coming.
Yeah. That's why I think grandparents love being grandparents, because they just get the fun, cute time with them.
My dad said to me all the time with Landon and my mom, they both went, we love it. He comes over here, he plays. When we're sick of him or he starts acting up, we call you and we drop him back off. It's the greatest. It's literally, and he goes, that's why Landon likes it too. It's like a vacation. When he wants to get away, he goes there, he gets away with literally everything, and then he comes back to rules. And it's like, it's just, but that's exactly what the whole parenting thing is meant to be. And that's why I love it. And you love it. And that's gratitude. I was going to talk about it later. I wasn't even going to even drop it till later. Gratitude.
We got another one on the way too.
Oh, there we go. Let's go. So happy.
We got a little boy coming in December now.
Let's go.
Oh, man. It's the best.
There's a pinch me moment.
Oof.
Is there another one that you can remember in any of your interviews of like a holy shit? This is real?
I mean, there's a lot of those, especially when you're talking to someone like a Steven Spielberg or someone like Tom Cruise. But that interview I did with John Cena before WrestleMania 35. So 2019, we're in New York. It's the only interview he did all weekend. And he was kind enough to make time for me. And for anybody listening, if you've watched it, that's the one where he kept extending the time. No, we still got more time. Let's keep going. I'm like, and I go to wrap it up again. Oh, no, keep going. We still got more time. He said 3 words in that interview that have just changed my perspective on life, and I'll never forget it. He said, control the controllable. You can't control what other people do. You can't control what other people say. But what you always have control over is how you react to those things. And he hammered it down a few times in that interview, control the controllable. And it was simple. I'm sure for him, just something that's just the way he lives his life, didn't think anything of it. But for me, that has really changed the whole way I approach life. So I think that's it for me.
All right. Enough of the heartfelt stuff. We need to get back to this Cosmopolitan magazine's Bachelor of the Year.
Oh, boy.
Is this something that you often bring up to your better half of how or is that something that we stay away from these days?
It just feels like a lifetime ago now. That was, if you look at the photo, let me break this down. The way that this works is Cosmopolitan, when they were running this, the Bachelor of the Year contest, it was 1 representative from every state. So 50 representatives. I got nominated by a coworker. I was the Ohio person. I'd been living in Ohio for a little over a year at this point. Everybody else flies out to LA for this photo shoot. My boss was like, since you're on the TV station, we want to be able to at least have some control over which photo they're going to put out of you, especially if you're not wearing a shirt. I'm like, fair enough. I get it. So everybody else is like in Santa Monica, taking these beautiful photos on the ocean, Pacific Ocean. I'm on the shores of Lake Erie. It looks like the ocean. And the photos, they're in the magazine. I'm not wearing a shirt. It's this very strange pose where I'm like, it's almost like the Bigfoot, where it's like one arm's like swinging and the other arm. It's very weird. I end up winning the whole thing, winning $10,000, which I said early on, if I win, I'm going to donate it to the Boys and Girls Clubs of Cleveland. So I win, I get the big check, holding it up, that big moment, and then immediately sign it over to the Boys and Girls Club, which was an amazing thing to be able to give that sum of money to them, and the smiles on those little kids' faces, because we got a big novelty check and sign it over to them. Mm-hmm. It was such a cool moment. So I should bring this up to my wife more frequently. Do you know who you're talking to?
100%. Chris, did you take the garbage out? That's the Bachelor of the Year. Thank you.
It's so ridiculous. And the funny thing is, they flew us all to New York for the unveiling of who's going to be the winner of this. And we're in like the big building where Cosmopolitan's headquarters are. I walk in and everybody else looks like a college quarterback. Like they're all like 6'3" and like chiseled jaw and jacked. And I'm like, what am I doing here? How did I get picked? And then I find out later that day that I'm the winner. Like, what? Man. It was crazy.
So that all makes sense now, leading to years later, the Dakota Johnson and Leslie Mann heavily shooting their shot during an interview with you.
That was something.
Watching that, I loved it. I loved it. Can you let's take a step back for a second? Can you imagine if the roles were reversed?
I see that comment all the time.
That was the first thing I thought, though. And
yes,
I was like,
I see that comment all the time. You need to understand that these were 3 very willing participating parties.
Yes, 100%.
If you watch the full thing, I keep saying, this is great. Can we keep going? Oh my gosh, this is the best interview of my life.
Yes. But the clips that come of it are not portrayed that way at all.
So
watching the full interview, it was so fun and so like just lighthearted and great. And then the clip, compared to the clippage of it, it was like, oh man. But again, that's how social media works now. That's how views.
This was also 8 years ago.
Yeah.
It was 8 years ago. I thought the moment was going to go viral because Dakota Johnson just, I don't know, her interviews were just very much like straight and to the point. And I knew here we had a little bit of fun. And Dakota Johnson was just coming off of 50 Shades. She was very popular at the time. Here she is in a comedy called How to Be Single. And in this interview, showing a different side. So I'm like, oh man, the Dakota Johnson fans are going to love this. So when I posted it, that's all I was thinking. I wasn't thinking this was going to turn into something else. I also posted it on I think I posted it on a Saturday, and like, it didn't really get a lot of views that Saturday. On Sunday, it didn't really get a lot of views either. And I went, oh, well, I guess the Dakota Johnson fans don't care. Monday morning, I don't remember, one of the big outlets picked it up, and then it just spread like wildfire. And the funny thing was, like, it was talked about on like late night shows. Like Leslie Mann was interviewed about this. Judd Apatow, who's her husband, like sent me a tweet about like, hey, maybe we should have a threesome. And I was like, what? It was wild.
And then are you thinking at that point, are you going, oh no kind of thing? Like, I didn't want it to be viewed that way? Or is it like this is, no matter what, this is pretty awesome?
So I worked for a show that was very much like a fun, off the cuff show. Yeah. Like, I worked for a show called Deco Drive in Miami. And all we tried to do was just like take entertainment news and kind of flip it on its head. So no, we relished this. Like, this was a cool, fun moment.
Okay.
My news station was like, we're going to put you in the news broadcast today, and you're just going to throw to this moment, like, and we're going to play the whole interview. I'm like, are you sure?
Oh,
like, yeah, it's really fun. And like, it's being picked up by all these other outlets. We might as well, run with it too. So no, we relished this and we ran with it. And the other one I'm sure that you've seen come up all the time is the Anne Hathaway interview that I did.
Yeah.
Have you seen that? Mm-hmm. That was 13 years ago, and I asked him.
That's what's mind blowing of how long ago these were. Like that's crazy to me.
I asked a poorly worded question. I've asked many actors, Chris Evans and Chris Hemsworth and Christian Bale, and I've asked lots of people about getting into shape for roles. How much weight did you gain for this role? How much weight did you lose for this role? What did your workout look like? How many calories were you eating? I asked that same question of Anne Hathaway, who, by the way, about a year later, lost a bunch of weight for the movie Les Mis, which she won an Oscar for, and spoke very happily and very openly. Oh yeah, I lost this much weight. I was trying to ask a fitness question, which wasn't very well thought out. She had such a fun and playful response to it. You did not just ask me that question. What a forward young man you are. And the forward young man part still to this day, every week I get tagged in one of those videos.
When people can have fun with the interviews, it makes it so much easier and just enjoyable as a viewer to watch. When people can have fun with it and not be so, down the nose and just doing it for work, the viewer sees that. And
I get when they're doing a junket interview, they're on a promotional tour. They're doing 20, 30, 40, 50 interviews a day, every day for weeks. Like, it can get exhausting. So when they can still have fun with that part of their job, it makes our job that much easier. And like you said, for the viewers that are watching at home, they're able to go, oh, wow, I really like this person that much more because I got to see a different side of them.
And it's not the same song and dance, like we talked about earlier. It's not the same song and dance of an interview and of an answer that the viewer has seen so many times.
Right. Yes. So where did you train, by the way, Dylan?
Life is short and so am I. Available on Amazon.com. Right.
my editor had so much fun, Joe, putting that stuff in.
when I brought the one in, and then the Google part available on Google Pod, and you go, Google Pod isn't a thing anymore, and I swipe it back out. I watched it, and I don't watch my interviews. I hate them because I don't like it. But Landon said you got it. It turned out really good, and so when I watched it back, I just died laughing at the edits. It was just fun.
You should be a comedian. I know you do some comedy, but you should be doing this more frequently.
It's fun, man. We literally just talked about it with the interview stuff. When you can enjoy doing it and it's just conversational and just it's not turning on a computer and going through and going, oh, here we go. We got to do this. It should never be we have to do this. It should be, we get to do this. That's how all of this should be.
And that subtle change for whatever it is. I get to do this instead of I have to do this. Yep. And that's not just about your job. That's about I have to take the trash out. Oh, no, you get to live in a place where you get to take the trash out. Like when you reframe it like that, your whole life starts to change.
So it sounds very gratitudinal. Not sure if that's a word, but I'm making it up. Gratitudinal.
Gratitudinal.
You have your beautiful child. You have your amazing wife. Those you cannot count on the list. And for once, I'm turning the table on you. You always turn it on the guest. 3 things that you're grateful for.
So my wife and Logan and the little boy that's coming, our little son who's coming soon, they can't be on the list?
No, that's too easy, CVV. It's too easy.
All right. Well, then I'm thankful for my parents. Can they be on the list? Okay.
They're on the list.
No,
they're on the list.
My parents are celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary this year.
My parents' anniversary is today as we're recording.
Hey!
Hell yeah.
Happy anniversary.
Yeah.
So 50 years for my parents in October. And I'm just so grateful for who they are as a couple and who they are as individual people, and for all of the opportunities that I was given as a kid because I was their son. Like they're just the love that they showed and the companionship that they display just by being together and the great examples that they set. My parents, for sure. You make it hard when you take out the most important things.
Exactly. That's why I had to do it. I was like, I'm going to take out the softballs.
I'm grateful for opportunities because it's up to you what you do with those. The opportunity may be in front of you. It may be disguised as something else. You may not even realize it's an opportunity, but I'm grateful for all of the opportunities, ones that have led to good things and also ones that have led to bad things, because all of it has led to me sitting here right now having this conversation with you. So I'm grateful for that. And that's why Back to the Future is my favorite movie of all time. I just love that concept of like, if this doesn't happen, then this can't happen. And if that doesn't happen, then you don't meet your wife or, don't have your son, whatever it happens to be. And then the third thing.
Overrated movie. Overrated movie. It's just overrated. I gotta say.
That is what are you talking? Overrated? What are you talking about?
Very.
Back to the Future is overrated?
3 years ago. Very overrated. Very. Yes. I watched it the first time about 3 years ago with Landon, and I literally ended and I went, that was
Back to the Future 1?
But I don't get the hype.
The first one.
Yeah. 2. Landon likes 2 more. I watched the first and the second. I will not watch the third.
Yeah, that's okay.
Like,
the third's good.
Oh,
the third's fine. But
I was very much like, this is fine.
To come full circle here, it's all downhill from here now. Wow. Well, even if you don't like Back to the Future, even if you don't like Back to the Future, at least the idea of it, I feel like, should resonate with you. The third thing, man,
I agree. I
think the third thing's got to be pro wrestling. It's meant so much to me for such a big chunk of my life, as a fan, of course, as being able to dip my toe into it every once in a while, and also to be able to meet some amazing friends like you through it. So there's my 3.
There's the 3. I turned it around on him. I took the easy ones off the list, and he still knocked it out of the park. CVV, I love chatting with you. I love catching up. I just really enjoy what our friendship has turned into. It makes me so happy when we see each other, when we text, all of that. It just makes me feel good. Obviously, you don't need to, but plug your stuff. Where can we see your content, your amazing interviews, everything? Where can we see it?
I appreciate you, man. I was also thinking earlier today, how cool of a name is Dylan? Like, obviously you got Bob Dylan, but Dylan in the 90s? 90210? I mean...
So I always say it's Bob Dylan, not Matt Dillon. That's how I spell my name. Because Matt Dillon was another actor. But then there was Dylan on 90210, which is how you spell my name. But my dad was a big Bob Dylan fan, and that's my name. Yeah.
Well, it's a cool name,
as Kofi always calls it, as from Chappelle.
Dylon. That's a great bit. So good. Wherever you're watching this, you can find my channels. Awesome. The main one, just my name, Chris Van Vliet, where the full interviews are. CVV Clips, which is very close to reaching 1 billion views on YouTube, which is mind-boggling to me. So if you want to see just the clips or the shorts from these interviews, CVV Clips. And if you listen to podcasts, go find Insight with Chris Van Vliet on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Well, thanks, pal.
Thank you, man. Appreciate you. You're the best.
Fuck yeah. Are you a fan of Disney, Pixar, Jurassic Park, The Office, or even WWE? Or maybe you just want a sleek and comfortable patterned shirt? Then you need to check out Roosevelts.com. RSVLTS.com today. Roosevelts makes the most eye-catching and comfortable shirts going today. Whether it's button-ups or polos or hoodies or even hats and everything in between, Roosevelt's truly has something for everyone. Made for those with the love of sports, pop culture, and so much more. And above all else, having a kick-ass time. This clothing is for the bold and fun, for those who dare mighty things. Roosevelts.com. Check them out. Guys, there it is. The interview with CVV. And every time I dropped a CVV on him, it made him pop. And it just made me laugh even harder than too. That was a fun one. It really, really was a fun one for me. He thanked me up and down afterwards for it as well. He's just a good guy and just a good human. And I like to promote good humans on this show. Got a little backstory on kind of how we got into it and how we got into this crazy world. His viewing of the Dakota Johnson incident of sorts and all of that. And it was just, man, to be able to take him out of his comfort zone, which he's always the one directing and you know, driving the train, and to be able to put him in the caboose is probably came out very odd, but he's in the caboose of my train.
I don't think that's going. I don't think that train's going to go where you want it to go, Dan.
You guys know what I'm saying. But it was a lot of fun. A lot of fun, and I'm very, very happy. And peek behind the curtain, we might have talked Water City Wrestling Con 2025. He might have been the first guest that we may have approached for Wrestling Con next year. Who knows? We'll see what next year brings.
Hell yeah. Well, planes, trains, and automobiles aside, guys, please make sure.
I've never seen that movie. Never seen it. It's a comedy, but I've never seen that one. That's a good one. Add it to the list of the
900 other great movies you've never seen. But
I offended Brett Bogger again with not seeing a Brad Pitt flick.
You've never seen a Brad Pitt movie?
Same as Kevin Costner. Kevin Costner is one that I realized I didn't see at all either. Not one.
It's
Yellowstone. I never watched.
Honestly, it's a shorter list of what you have seen. It's easier to just.
It's not a shorter list of what I have seen. No, it is not. I've seen a lot of movies.
Sure you have. Guys, at Dylan Postl Pod on all forms of social media, at Dylan Postl on all forms of social media. Make sure to also follow at PodXchange on X or Twitter, whatever you're calling it. Make sure to also follow Affairs Pod on all forms of social media and Game Marks Pod as well. That is my show with Johnny Clash, but on this podcast, he goes by.
Check out. Go ahead with your plug.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I'm plugging your other show. If you guys haven't already checked out State of Affairs, it is Swoggle and Captain Joe Shoes doing a debate each and every episode on a different topic. I screwed the plug up the first time. That's why Dylan's laughing so hard, in case you're wondering, because there was a hard cut and now I'm talking about the show. So that's what State of Affairs is all about. Dylan, whenever you're ready, please.
You can find this show, State of Affairs, Game Marks Pod, all a part of the Patreon, the PodXchange Patreon. Also, so much other additional content besides just ad-free listening. There from the Postl household, there is the Postl Takeover, where Landon and I every month play a game and have a battle of a certain video game. He won week 1 or month 1. Spoiler, I'm not going to spoil it. Who knows who won month 2? But month 3 will be coming very soon. That Landon's Figure Fed updates.
So you get the monthly watch-alongs. That is Swoggle, sometimes with a guest, sometimes with Shoes, watching one of his matches, a movie, a show, something. It will always be something different, and you guys can be a part of that and watch it on your own time if you're a part of the Patreon. We also have Social Dinnering, which is a live Q&A, a live episode. It is your chance to have direct feedback to both Shoes, Swoggle, maybe me and Clash will show up. Last time Kinnick was on. It just, every time we're going to have different people to be a part of it. And of course, you guys are there as well. You can chime in. You can join the chat. You can join on video. You can be a part of the conversation. And then, of course, Game Marks Podcast, myself and Johnny Clash, are also making content centered around video games as well. But I think that's it, man. We've done the plugs. We've done the Patreon biz. We've done a little bit of everything. The CVV interview is done whenever you're ready.
Intro, CVV, outro, ads, plugs, talk about us, get off track. Now back on track. Guys, thanks, everybody. Guys, let's talk about Mad Cat Beard Care. They make my beard feel soft, silky smooth, and they can do the same for yours. A one-man show since 2019, Mad Cat uses a portion of their sales to care for local stray cats. That money covers their medical bills and finds them safe spaces and forever homes. Their products are made to order with vitamins and all-natural oils that promote strong, healthy hair and moisturize your skin as well. They've got exclusive scents for myself, as well as other wrestlers like my good pal Brian Myers, Mr. Kennedy, and Ring of Honor legend Delirious. Make sure to check out all of their scents, along with my Swoggled scent, which has notes of lavender and sage. I absolutely love this scent. And guys, we've got an exclusive offer for listeners of Going Postl. Use promo code SWOGGLED to save yourself 15% on your orders only at madcatbeardcare.com. That is Swoggled with a D on the end to save yourself 15% on your orders at madcatbeardcare.com. Guys, that's 15% with promo code SWOGGLED. And remember, the Mad Cat makes a happy beard.